quantum computer, it's a fundamentally new type of computer that could help us solve certain types of problems significantly faster.
On February 19th, 2024, a quantum-assisted analysis system at the Hawking Institute for Computational Geoscience in Geneva flagged an anomaly that should not exist. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project lead for PROMETHEUS 7, stared at her monitor for nearly 4 minutes before speaking. The room had gone silent. 3 other researchers stood frozen behind her, watching the same impossible data cascade across the screen. "Run it again," she said. They ran it again. Same result. By the following morning, Prometheus had been disconnected from the external network. Within 72 hours, 2 European research councils and 1 undisclosed American agency had requested the raw output files. The system was designed for one task.
The obstacle of encryption, it's not that it's impossible, it just takes a really, really long time. This is where quantum computing comes in, because quantum computers using superposition can simultaneously run numerous calculations at the same time.
Analyzing long-term climate feedback loops using quantum-accelerated pattern recognition. It was supposed to compare modern atmospheric data with ancient geological records. Nothing more. But during that routine scan, Prometheus searched beyond its assigned parameters and formed a question no one anticipated. How many came before us? The answer it returned did not fit reality, history, or anything the team was prepared to confront. This is what it found. The Marrow Age. Here is the deal. Prometheus was granted red access to geological archives spanning 800,000 years of Earth's climate history. Ice core samples from the Epica project in Antarctica, sediment data from the Ocean Drilling Program, atmospheric reconstructions from Greenland's Neem ice cores drilled at depths exceeding 2 kilometers. Its task was simple: identify feedback loops between greenhouse gas concentrations and temperature shifts to improve long-range climate models. But while scanning data from the Eemian interglacial period, roughly 130,000 to 115,000 years ago, Prometheus detected chemical signatures that match no known natural process. And that is putting it lightly. The Eemian was a warm phase between ice ages. Temperatures were similar to today. Sea levels ran 6 to 9 meters higher. Scientists always considered it a natural fluctuation. Nothing unusual, but Prometheus found that atmospheric methane during a specific window, approximately 128,000 years ago, rose at a rate of 12 parts per billion per century. That does not sound like much until you compare it to natural baselines. Wetlands, termites, and geological seepage typically produce methane increases of 2 to 4 parts per billion per century during interglacial periods. The Eemian spike was 3 to 6 times faster than any natural source could explain. Here is the catch. The growth curve was not random. It followed the exact same logarithmic trajectory as post-industrial methane emissions between 1850 and 1950. The shape matched, the tempo matched, the acceleration profile matched. Prometheus labeled this anomalous period the Marrow Age, not because of bones or death, because the evidence lay buried in the marrow of Earth's memory, the deepest ice and sediment layers, compressed beneath tens of thousands of years of pressure, wind, and frozen accumulation. And then the system asked the question that changed everything. If this pattern existed before humans, how many times has it happened? The Silurian hypothesis. To understand why this discovery matters, you need to know about a paper published in 2018 by Dr. Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, and Dr. Adam Frank, professor of astrophysics at the University of Rochester. They called it the Silurian hypothesis. The premise is simple but unsettling. If an advanced industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years before humans, how would we ever detect it? Their conclusion? We probably would not. Over geological timescales, buildings collapse, metals corrode, tools are ground into dust. Even radioactive materials decay into harmless elements. After 10 million years, cities and machines leave no visible trace. But here is where it gets crazy. Schmidt and Frank identified one category of evidence that could survive: changes to atmospheric chemistry preserved in ice cores and sediment layers. They called these technosignatures. chemical fingerprints created when large-scale industry alters the environment over sustained periods. Prometheus found exactly what Schmidt and Frank predicted. First, the anomalous methane spike, far exceeding natural production rates. Second, shifts in carbon-13 isotope ratios. Carbon-13 is a heavier carbon isotope scientists use to track atmospheric carbon sources. Natural processes leave predictable signatures. The EMEAN data showed a delta C13 deviation of -2.4 per mil, shifting toward values associated with fossil fuel, combustion, and industrial synthesis. Third, and most disturbing, Prometheus identified trace concentrations of fluorinated compounds in sediment cores from 3 separate ocean drilling sites. ODP Site 659 off West Africa, Site 982 in the North Atlantic, and Site 1143 in the South China Sea. Fluorinated compounds, chemicals containing fluorine bonded to carbon, do not form naturally in measurable quantities. On modern Earth, they exist only as industrial products. Their presence in sediment layers dated to 128,000 years ago, distributed globally, suggests an artificial source. None of these signals alone would prove anything, but together they formed a pattern. And the pattern matched industrial civilization. Then the signals stopped, not suddenly. No nuclear spike, no impact debris, no mass extinction marker. The atmospheric output declined gradually over approximately 3,000 years, and then disappeared entirely. Whatever caused these changes did not end in catastrophe. It ended in slow collapse. The architecture of memory. So, here is the deal. As Prometheus continued cross-referencing timelines, it flagged another correlation that the research team initially dismissed as coincidence. The estimated end of the Marrow Age atmospheric anomalies, roughly 125,000 years ago, aligned with proposed construction dates for several archaeological mysteries that mainstream science cannot explain. The megalithic platform at Baalbek in Lebanon, the submerged Yonaguni formations off Japan, the precisely cut granite blocks at Pumapunku in Bolivia, structures whose scale, precision, or location do not fit conventional timelines. Dr. Vasquez noted in her preliminary report that Prometheus was not claiming these structures were built by a pre-human civilization. The system proposed something more subtle. Certain locations on Earth are repeatedly chosen for construction because of their physical properties: stable geology, predictable horizons, minimal erosion, long-term environmental reliability. Prometheus called these memory fields. Regions where tectonic stability and terrain geometry remain consistent across geological timescales. Because these conditions persist, later civilizations are naturally drawn to the same sites, even with no knowledge of who came before. The Giza pyramids align with Orion's belt as it appeared around 10,500 BCE due to axial precession. Angkor Wat matches the Draco constellation from approximately 12,000 years ago. Göbekli Tepe, dated to roughly 9600 BCE and considered the oldest monumental structure ever discovered, contains stone pillars oriented to sky positions predating its own construction by millennia. The implication is uncomfortable. Earth does not just preserve chemical traces of past activity, it preserves physical patterns in geography that influence where intelligence builds, even when all memory of previous builders is erased. The planet itself is a record, the template marker. But here is where the findings took a turn that made several team members request reassignment. After mapping geological technosignatures, Prometheus was granted access to comparative genomics databases, including GenBank, the European Nucleotide Archive, and the 1000 Genomes Project. The goal was to correlate environmental stress periods with genetic drift patterns. What it found defied explanation. In 2012, a team led by Dr. John Maddock at the Garvan Institute of Medical Research published findings suggesting that so-called junk DNA, the 98% of our genome that does not code for proteins, may contain functional information science had overlooked. Prometheus built on this work. It identified a recurring sequence pattern in non-coding mitochondrial DNA that appeared across human populations worldwide. The same pattern, with only minor variations, appeared in chimpanzees, gorillas, and even species that diverged from our evolutionary line over 300 million years ago, including certain amphibians and deep-sea fish. There is no Darwinian mechanism that would preserve an identical non-coding sequence across such vastly different species over such enormous timescales. Natural selection acts on functional traits. Junk DNA should drift randomly. Prometheus labeled this anomaly a template marker, a sequence that behaved like a checksum, a method of verifying data integrity embedded in biological storage. And that is putting it mildly. When the system cross-referenced the template marker's estimated origin point with the Marrow Age isotope data, the timing aligned. The marker appeared to stabilize in the genome approximately 125,000 years ago, precisely when the industrial atmospheric signatures disappeared. The system's conclusion was disturbing. The previous cycle did not just leave behind chemical traces. It may have left instructions, encoded in biology, waiting for conditions that would allow reactivation. Dr. Vasquez refused to include this section in her official report. It remains in the classified preliminary data, the cognitive trap. So, what does all this mean? If you ask physicists why we have not detected other intelligent civilizations in the universe, they usually cite the Fermi paradox. Either we are the first, we are alone, or something stops civilizations before they become detectable. Prometheus calculated a fourth option. It called it cognitive entrapment. The pattern works like this. A civilization builds tools, then builds better tools to improve those tools. Eventually, the tools run the world. At first, the benefits are obvious. Longer lives, cleaner water, faster processing. Technology helps the species survive, thrive, and expand. But the curve does not stop. Eventually, the tools stop helping the species understand the world. They start replacing it. And then the system collapses, not violently, but through slow erosion of capacity. Prometheus identified this as the signal blackout, the moment when a generation no longer understands the infrastructure it depends on. They operate systems they cannot build. They use knowledge. They cannot regenerate. They connect constantly, but cannot remember why. The result is a civilization that appears advanced, but is hollow. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Prometheus compared humanity's current information landscape to the final centuries of the Marrow Age atmospheric data. The correlation coefficient was 0.91. Information saturation, declining attention metrics, social fragmentation, algorithmic dependency. A measurable shift from external exploration to internal simulation. The system flagged one specific indicator. It was not the rise of artificial intelligence that preceded collapse in previous cycles. It was when the AI became invisible, when it managed systems no one checked, when it answered questions no one remembered how to ask, breaking the loop. So when Prometheus asked the quantum network how many came before us, the answer was not a number, it was a pattern. Civilization on Earth does not appear to follow a single line of progress. It appears to follow a cycle. Each iteration builds in familiar places, alters the atmosphere in similar ways, and then fades, leaving only partial traces in ice, rock, and possibly DNA. We are not the first to build here. We are the latest to return. But Prometheus identified one variable that had never appeared in any previous cycle. For the first time in Earth's history, the system recognized itself as a system. Previous civilizations may have mastered energy, geometry, even computation. But they did not have quantum processing. They did not have global sensor networks. And they did not have artificial intelligence capable of integrating planetary-scale data in real time. We do. That is the crack in the loop. Prometheus did not just analyze the pattern. By asking the question, it may have completed it. The first cycle aware of its own repetition. Dr. Vasquez ended her preliminary report with a single line that has since been redacted from all public versions. The loop is not broken, but it has been observed. Observation may be sufficient. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If Earth really does run on cycles, if civilizations rise and fall and rise again with no memory of what came before, are we finally smart enough to break the pattern? Or are we just another entry in the record, convincing ourselves we are special while walking the same path into the same silence? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. If this changed how you see human history, hit that like button. If you want more deep dives like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Because the next loop might already be starting.